Should be live.
I'm waiting for Facebook to connect. Not seeing a placeholder for YouTube.
Can you guys hear me?
I could hear you, Jackson.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Good.
Yep.
Ah,
can hear
thank you. I don't know what was going on.
Are you on Facebook?
you.
Jackson?
Yep.
It's still not connecting.
Facebook is not. Or YouTube.
Facebook is not. Neither one.
Okay, Aria thinks that we're live on YouTube and Facebook, but Ryan's not seeing it yet.
So, refresh Facebook again. Yeah, neither social media platform is currently showing up here. Ari, do you think it's my computer or are you seeing it? What's that? Okay. China, are you? Okay. YouTube is working. Okay. Really, your YouTube is working, huh?
Ryan, I can check Facebook.
there
What
it
do I
is.
need to search?
Okay, looks like we have one platform working. We have YouTube working now.
Hey, Ryan,
Yes, sir.
you want me to check Facebook? I've got it. What do I need to search for on Facebook?
Tippecanoe County, Indiana. It's the government Facebook page. Yeah, we do have YouTube working now. So in past meetings, when we at least have one of them, that seems to suffice. But I'll leave that up to you, sir. But yes, we do have YouTube working.
Zach, what are your thoughts on that?
We need to go ahead and get started. So
Okay,
as long as we've got one program broadcasting, we're fine.
sounds good. With that, Sally, you ready?
Ready.
All right. With that, we'll call the September 2nd, 2020 Executive Committee public hearing to order. Zach, if you'd call the roll, please.
Sure thing. When I call your name, please signify your presence. Jackson Bogan,
Here.
Tom Murtaugh,
Present.
Gary Schroeder,
Here.
Jerry Reynolds,
Here.
Carl Griffin,
Here.
Larry Leverance,
Here.
Greg Jones.
Here.
All members are present. We do have a quorum.
On to the approval of the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from the August 5th, 2020 meeting as submitted.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes. All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? That carries. We have no new business this month and we have no new public hearing. We'll go to the approval of the June APC agenda.
I move the following subdivision petition be placed on the September 16th, 2020 Area Plan Commission public hearing agenda at petitioner's request. Placement thereon being without reference to compliance or non-compliance with this adopted subdivision ordinance. S 4935 Doherty Commerce Center minor subdivision, a replat of lot 14 minor sketch.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That carries.
I move that the following rezoning petitions be placed on the September 16th, 2020 Area Plan Commission public hearing agenda. Z 2802 Jose E. Gaella, GB to I3, Z 2803 Kaysen and Earl LLC, I3, NB, NGB to NB, Z 2804 Mezzanine 7 LLC, R3W to R4W, and Z 2805 Midwest Rentals Incorporated, care of Nancy Fosnot, PDNR to GB.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. We have no new cases for the June ABZA agenda. On to determination of variances, Lafayette Division.
I move that the following request for variance for the unified zoning ordinance is not a request for use variance prohibited from consideration by ordinance and statute. That's case 2020-16, Rebrenna Properties LLC.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That carries. Review and approval of the August budget report.
I move we approve the August budget report as submitted.
I second.
Sally?
The only thing to mention is under travel costs and mileage, there's an expense of $212.32. The majority of that is Larry Ackerman's registration for the annual Indiana Floodplain Managers Conference, which is which we use to keep him up to date, as well as to allow him to obtain his continuing education to maintain his certification.
Very well, then. Any questions? We have a motion and a second on this. All in favor as presented? Aye. All opposed? That carries. Gary will take that motion.
I move we adjourn.
There you are. Over to you, Larry.
Thank you. Zach, whenever we're ready, I'm ready.
Let's just give it about a minute, just because of the delay we have on YouTube, and then we'll get started. All right, Larry, I think you're good to call us to order.
Okay, thank you, Zach. I will call the September 2nd meeting of the Area Planning Commission Ordinance Committee to order. First item, or go ahead and call the roll, Zach.
All right, when I call your name, please signify your presence. Gary Schroeder,
Here.
Jackson Bogan,
Here.
Vicky Pearl,
Here.
Tom Murtaugh,
Present.
Jerry Reynolds,
Here.
Carl Griffin,
I'm here.
Greg Jones,
Here.
Larry Leverins.
Here.
All members are present, and we do have.
Okay, first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the August 5th meeting.
I move we approve the minutes from the August 5th, 2020 meeting as submitted.
Second.
Any additions, corrections?
I was at that meeting and I was marked absent. Jerry Reynolds here. I was at the executive and the ordinance.
Okay, with that correction. Any others? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries, and we'll make that correction.
Larry,
Yes,
I think the problem was when the roll call was taken, he didn't have a connection and he was never on a vote. So it sort of begs the question for us as to whether that was at the meeting or not, because there were no votes from Jerry.
Yes, you're correct, Sally, because I had to get switched to the phone because it was, I lost connection.
Okay, so I guess the question for Zach real quick is, we should show him present, but then not voting.
I think technically Jerry was present and he was unable to vote and abstain due to technical difficulties if there were voting items.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay, that's how we'll that's how we'll change the minutes. Thank you.
okay. Thank you, Zach. First item on the agenda, only item on the agenda, is the Discovery Park District form-based overlay. Ryan?
Yes, and it looks like Facebook is now working, so we have both platforms operational. I'll go ahead and get into it. I've got the slideshow here with me. First off, this morning Diane had emailed the entire committee as well as all the important stakeholders, PRF and the city staff, this version here that I'm bringing up on my screen. So if you have not looked at that, it should be in your email from Diane from about mid-morning today. So if there aren't any questions or concerns about that, I'll go ahead and jump into this. What you see before you is essentially virtually 90% of it is what you saw a month ago. It's just now been repackaged into an ordinance format. And so it goes in sequential order by the ordinance chapters, so that it's very clear what we're changing first and so forth. So it sort of leads off with chapter 1, the definitions section, and then it ends with the creation of this new section to chapter 7 that captures all of the Discovery Park District form-based overlay. So I'm going to run through this, and then you'll see in a couple places there's some red boxes. Those are surrounding areas that really aren't applicable to the Discovery Park issue. These are some kind of fix-its that we've been meaning to do, and we're just taking the opportunity of this ordinance revision to get them in. These are some requests from the city of Lafayette, and I'll briefly explain them as we go. And I'll also talk about some of the changes, subtle changes that occurred after a subsequent meeting, Zoom meeting with the PRF staff and their consultants. And then the city staff was not party to that particular conference, and so I briefed them and gave them everything that went into that conference, and so they have those changes as well as what's before you now. And so I certainly want to invite them, if they've had a chance to kind of look over some of these changes, to also report back to us. We want to make sure everyone's on the same page here. And I assured them that this is not set in stone, that you know, we still have time to make some changes. So let's go ahead and get into this. Section 1 here on the first page includes all the new definitions that we're creating. And so we have the urban agriculture, which kind of speaks for itself there. I'm not going to read these verbatim. Urban pilot manufacturing. What you're seeing here is basically smaller scale operations that are suitable for an urban environment, as opposed to much larger scale type of situation that's appropriate for industrial zones. So we have zones for these much larger operations, but we'd like to try to find some that are more customized for and appropriate in scale for an urban setting. And so that's what those first two are about. Micro production of alcoholic beverages, similar sort of philosophies behind that. Specialty food production. As you can see, these are, you know, items that are being manufactured, you know, food and beverage items that would not have necessarily an offensive, you know, operation that, you know, would cause bad smells or what have you, in an urban setting where you have higher residential densities and so forth. So we exclude those items that really belong out of a dense area, and leave things such as, you know, ice cream making, bakery, the sort of things that that would probably come to mind. Monument sign here. If you can see my my mouse, that's the second one here on this page. The monument sign has never been formally defined in our ordinance. We kind of dance around it, you know, half a zillion ways, but we never actually tied it down. And during the course of this process with Discovery Park form-based overlay, we created a monument sign definition within that code. And after further discussion and reflecting on it, we said, well, this is actually pretty applicable to the whole community for those that want to create a monument sign and actually have it defined and shaped. And so we've gone ahead and kind of pulled it out of the Discovery Park overlay section and put it into Chapter 1 as a defined term. Then in the overlay, we add a little some restrictions to it, which you can do in an overlay setting. But this is a Chapter 1 definition for monument sign. The gateway sign definition was subtly changed. That's an existing definition, but it's being modified to add this reference to Purdue University related type signage that's clearly these are entrance points to the university, where the university would be interested in having some sort of large sign that's not necessarily on trustee-owned land. And then the red box here contains a couple of cleanup items, as I mentioned before. This is deleting a reference to the community garden. This is something that was inserted during the Centennial form-based overlay process as a concept that the city was interested in pursuing. They've since decided they didn't want to tie this sort of use down that clearly, and so they wanted to have some flexibility, and they felt that it would be best just to delete the definition altogether. It was never actually assigned to any particular zone. It was something exclusive to the Centennial District, so it's not. This isn't really going to cause many hiccups here. So we're just essentially striking a definition there. And then a subtle change to the CB zone. The CB zone, it currently is in Lafayette only, but the current in the definition of the CB zone in its intent section 2-19-1, it never specifically mentions that it's exclusive to Lafayette. It's just always been that way. And it was intended to be that way because West Lafayette has its own CB zone, the CBW zone. So we wanted, since the CBW zone is exclusive to West Lafayette, we wanted to make it crystal clear, in case there was any ambiguity, that that this is Lafayette's zone only. And so we replaced the word cities to the central parts of the city of Lafayette. So that's the subtle change there. And that's something that Lafayette has wanted us to do for a little while now. So we've gone ahead and done that. Next page here. Now we're into section, so that was changing section 1 and a subtle change to section 2. Now we're in section 3, chapter 3. This is the permitted use table. And what you'll see here is where these new definitions that we've created go in the zones. And so we now assign zones to these definitions. So for the first two, we've been in consultation with both cities, West Lafayette and Lafayette, and they were both in agreement that they liked the idea of this sort of urban flair to production of micro-production of alcoholic beverages and specialty food production be extended to all business zones and business-related zones, zones that are primarily business only, non-residential zones. Although in the U districts, you do get a mixed-use option, but it does prefer commercial. Residential is a sort of almost an accessory, But anyway, so we've so per both cities' agreement, we've included those zones. This, of course, will be extended into Discovery Park as well. They have every intention of rezoning the Discovery Park district to the CBW zone, and so these uses would be captured in that area. Urban agriculture is being permitted exclusive to the CBW zone with a footnote that we show below. Footnote, these are new footnotes, which if you recall the use table, we have the long list of uses with their zones assigned to them by right and by special exception. And then at the very end, there's a whole list of footnotes that has an extra set of requirements, regulations, and so forth, specific to a certain use in a certain zone. It's every footnote's a little different. So we're adding this new one here to make it clear that this urban agricultural use is only allowed within the Discovery Park district boundary, that it's not permitted district-wide in the CBW zone, which is again exclusive to West Lafayette, but it could be extended, but it is exclusive to that specific area within West Lafayette. If this is a use that takes off and either Lafayette or West Lafayette outside of Discovery Park are interested in extending this, well, we could do another zoning ordinance amendment to kind of liberalize this, but for now we're having it exclusive to Discovery Park. Urban pilot manufacturing is following a similar suit, exclusive to CBW, and also within CBW exclusive only to Discovery Park. The hospital use is being extended into the CBW zone with a footnote. And so this is to distinguish it from the MR zone, which allows hospitals without any size restrictions. In the urban zone of CBW, we want to have a sort of a ceiling on how big the hospital can be, because if it's in an enormous campus, that's just not appropriate in a downtown setting. And so, and even PRF was acknowledging that as well, and proffered this size limitation of 200,000 square feet as sort of an upper ceiling, so that you can have an urban hospital, medical building, so forth, that's perfectly appropriate in a downtown setting where you have a high residential density and people might even be able to walk or take their bike to this facility, not necessarily have to drive, but that this facility does not overwhelm the downtown and dominate it to the exclusion of other uses and mixes of uses. So that's the hospital change. Multifamily dwelling, this is something that came out of our early discussions with PRF when we were still considering the idea of tinkering with the OR zone, the office research zone, which presently is located in West Lafayette. It's not exclusive to West Lafayette, it's just so far only been utilized there since it was created. And so we saw an interest in these office research areas allowing a mixed use option for multifamily. And we're tagging on a footnote that limits it in a similar way to the NBU zone and the MR zone, where you can have multifamily apartments, but they have to be above that non-residential ground floor. So these are upper story type units. So they're similar to the MBU. It's primarily a business, or in this case, an office research zone, but we're allowing for this kind of minor use to be tagged onto it. You can't have an apartment building in the OR, but we're allowing a mixed use environment for the first time. And we think there could be some utility for this in the research park. The city of Lafayette's indicated interest in this, in possibly bringing the OR zone into parts of Lafayette and utilizing this mixed use option. So, so that's the story behind that. And then the footnotes I just went over in describing those zones and their where they're being assigned. And then section 4 here, again, this is not applicable to Discovery Park. This is more cleanup. Since we're deleting the reference to community gardens, the definition itself, I also had to go through the ordinance where community gardens is referenced and delete those as well. And so this is a section 7.2-3, which is the Centennial Code, and just eliminating those definition references. And so now we get into the main event. Section 5 is the creation of section 7-3 in the UZO, the Discovery Park District Form-Based Overlay. It follows a similar flow to the Centennial Code, although it's not as detailed. Centennial was trying to allow new development to harmonize with existing historic architecture, so there was a lot more nuance to that code. We don't have that situation in Discovery Park. We're creating a new neighborhood from scratch practically. And so so it doesn't have to, we're not going to be as strict as a result. So we have the intent. Here's our district boundary. So wherever that boundary is referenced that is exclusive to Discovery Park and those footnotes, et cetera, well, here's the boundary. And so it's basically south of State Street to 231, bounded on the west by Airport Road. Bounded on the east by essentially trustee-owned land. The boundary there sort of follows the limitation of where the trustee land begins and ends, and the PRF land begins and ends. And then the northwest part of the boundary includes the Airport Road, McCormick and State Street intersection area. And so that's our boundary. Now, if again to refresh your memory, again, this code only influences the existing conventional zones. Planned development zones are excluded from being beholden to these regulations, since they are exclusive zones unto themselves. So when PRF comes in with their rezone to rezone this entire area to CBW, they will be accepting out the existing 3 planned developments that are within this area: the Aspire project, the Convergence office building project, and then the new Continuum project that's under construction right now. Those 3 will continue to operate under their PD zones. So, all right, again, not gonna read this verbatim, but this is where I'll start talking about some of the subtle changes that we made to this code after further discussion with PRF. Here in the uses that are prohibited, we have a new prohibition on automobile parking. Automobile parking as a primary use is only allowed in the CB and CBW zones. They're meant as urban zones. So these are folks that want to have a parking lot as a business. That's essentially what it is, or a parking garage or what have you. And those are appropriate in downtown environments. That's why it's automobile parking as a primary use is exclusive to those urban zones. So the exception we put in here is concerning surface lots. We wanted to make sure that surface lots which are presently permitted in the CB and CBW zone. There's no, the ordinance does not make a distinction between what type of parking it is. It's just a parking lot that's a primary use or parking facility of some kind. But in an urban setting, gobbling up lots of land with a surface lot is pretty wasteful, and we wanted to try to provide a restriction in Discovery Park so that as development occurs, surface lots are very limited. And so we have a prohibition with some exceptions, and that's in this subsection C3, automobile parking. And it essentially lists this very detailed set of locations within Discovery Park where surface lots could be, so long as they are properly screened or behind a building and so forth. And the intention is that these lots could serve as essentially primary uses unto themselves, and then PRF, if they continue to be the owner, or whoever the owner of the parking lot is or parking facility, could then lease spaces out to other users surrounding them that might be outside of that, I believe, 300-foot boundary that the AO has the flexibility to assign, the parking for a primary use within an urban setting. So that's, this very long list is essentially shown in this image here. This image is not part of the ordinance itself. This is an illustrative exhibit that PRF came up with to kind of showcase it, and I believe they are on this Zoom in this meeting, and so they can kind of explain this when we get to, once I'm done with my presentation, we can go back to this if there's any questions about this. But that's essentially what we were doing, is trying to identify locations connected to streets, off streets, that where these primary use parking, surface parking lots could occur. Now, if it's not a surface lot, if they're building a parking garage, well, then they can go to town. They can build it anywhere within that boundary. And per the CBW zone, it allows parking as a primary use. And that's the intention for PRF in this area, is to have some targeted locations of structured parking that are generally centrally located so that they can be utilized by as many users, residential and non-residential, as possible. And that's their underlying planning strategy. So they'll have that option once it's zone CBW to have primary use parking. But we wanted to put some limitations around surface lots that were acceptable to PRF. They even see surface lots themselves as simply temporary measures until this neighborhood urbanizes even more, and these surface lots would likely be replaced by potentially buildings with structured parking, for instance. So that's the one subtle change there. Also, here in subsection 733C, the following uses shall be permitted within the overlay. We're doing something a little different here. Eating and drinking places with drive-through services. Now, these are permitted in general business zones and highway business zones and so forth, as you can imagine, vehicular-centric zones. But they are not permitted in the CBW zone. But we are offering a limitation on it, a fairly severe one. Drive-throughs in urban settings are disruptive to pedestrian flow generally, and that's why they've been excluded from the central business zones, both of them. And so, but PRF had shown interest in trying to create essentially an urban type drive-through without going overboard on design. And so we've decided, instead of designing a formal drive-through building that's part of their form-based overlay, we decided to do it with some verbiage. And it begins here, where it talks about this proposed use, SIC 58, is at the side or the rear of the building, subject to the AO's approval. So the AO has some kind of up or down authority here. And it references section 739A, and I'm just going to skip ahead to that since we're talking about it once we get past all the building stuff. 739A here talks about the disposition of automobile parking spaces, maneuvering aisles, and what it's paved with, etc. And then it talks about this drive-in situation, drive-through services. They shall not be located south of State Street. So immediately the entire southern part of this, which is easily 80% of the district, you can't have drive-throughs there. So we're just looking at that northwestern section on the northwest corner of the intersection of Airport and State. And they shall be screened from view, and again, subject to the AO approval. And so the AO has some latitude to have a final say in its design and implementation, but we are essentially allowing that use to be allowed within the Discovery Park District, but only within this specific area of the Discovery Park District. So it's a very limited area. So let me go back to where I left off, and if there's any questions about that, we'll take them. I guess before I go into building types, I'll stop and see if there's any questions at this point. Doesn't sound like it. Well, I'll go ahead and go through the building types. There were very few changes at all, mostly just topographical changes. The building types are essentially the guides for how to design a project within this area. And again, it follows the similar template from the Centennial Code, where we have, in this instance, kind of 4 different building types: a row house or townhouse type of building, which is a greater than 3 units together, physically abutting. The apartment building, the commercial building, essentially a non-residential type building, and then the mixed use environment building. And so these 4 are essentially described in great detail from, as it proceeds here, the site layout, the architecture design integrity, permitted materials list for the various aspects of architecture. We went through this list extensively with PRF, and I think everyone is happy here, all the way to building facades projections, and then other requirements, bike racks, site type, public infrastructure, as well as outdoor dining, seating, fences and walls requirements, vegetative green roofs, and then a brief statement there on buffer yards. Again, this is an urban setting. Buffer yards really are not appropriate in that type of environment, especially with the CBW zone that has kind of a 0 lot setback. So we went ahead and made that crystal clear there. In 736, we get into the details of the building types themselves. And again, there really were no changes here from what you saw a month ago. So I won't spend too much time here, but the first one is the row house. Here's an image of just a massing model showing what it could look like. And then the various details that construct this building type, the apartment building type, and the commercial mixed use building type, commercial and mixed use building type. It follows the same type of massing model, but it has different requirements in terms of height and location of uses within the structure. But they work, both those 3 buildings all work off of this one template. Then we get into, and once we get the buildings situated, then we go into the streetscape requirements. And we have a fairly extensive paragraph here on 737 that essentially ties this, since this streets would be built through the subdivision process. We reference the requirements of the thoroughfare plan, which of course is currently being amended. So its reference here will be tied to that new amendment when it comes in. Of course, the subdivision ordinance, West Lafayette City Code, and then we have sort of a clause in here to ensure that the existing streets that have already been laid down by the planned developments that are there, that there's some continuity between what's being built through the subdivision ordinance versus what was built through the PD ordinance. And so this statement here allows the AO to approve some alternative requirements to ensure some harmony as these streets go through this area. Then we move into the parking requirements. We already touched base on drive-through issue there. But we've liberalized the parking requirements here for uses. There's a 0.7 space per unit requirement on the residential, and then we list a host of the various non-residential uses and provide some parking requirements there. We provide parking reductions for mixes of uses on a single site or building, which is something we did also in Centennial. Loading requirements, and then permitted signage requirements. Again, this is where we have that monument sign. Now it's a defined term if this is passed, and so we say as defined shall not encroach on public right of way, and then a further restriction there that is exclusive to Discovery Park. And that's how we wrap it up with signage, and then we have a list of prohibitions, signage prohibitions at the end to ensure that there's a certain look and there's nothing gaudy being brought in terms of signage. And so that's that brings me to the end. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I think the PRF team and their consultants are available to ask any questions or answer any of your questions, as well as city staff, who I'm also anxious to hear from if they've had a chance to go through this this final draft. So Larry, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Any questions, first of all, from the committee members? Okay,
Gary,
hearing none.
Sorry, Larry, just a clarification. Maybe you covered this, Ryan. Are the standards permitted? Is that a use standard, or are they subject to being able to get a variance on any of those standards?
Variances from the development standards are prohibited. So you can't get a variance, and this is something that we laid down that's consistent with the Centennial Code. So you can't get variances from the development requirements within the overlay. The uses are controlled by the underlying zone. So if right now, presently, PRF is interested in rezoning the non-PD areas to CBW. In their mind, that captures the menu of uses they're most likely interested in. If that changes and they've, for instance, wanted to bring in a light industrial user, well, then they can do a rezone to an I district and then go through the subdivision process to establish that use. But that industrial user would have to pick one of the building types that's available to them and then proceed accordingly.
Right, that's what I was thinking. The permitted materials, and to get around that, they'd have to do a PD. Is that what you said earlier?
There is some flexibility with permitted materials. The AO can consider alternative materials, and that's in part just to the changing technologies. We don't want to limit ourselves to a list, and then if some new way to skin the cat that's even more cost effective and is even better quality comes around, well, we don't want to have to go through a UZO amendment every time. And so the AO does have some discretion on the materials. But yes, your question about planned developments, since they are exempt from Chapter 7, they're essentially the variance option. If someone can't fit a project within this code, then the planned development is probably the more appropriate option, and in this instance, the exclusive option.
Very good, Ryan. That answered my question. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from the committee? Does anyone from PRF want to comment or acknowledge anything here? How about the city?
Chad Spitznagel, Building Commissioner. We have had city staff has had a chance to review the red line stuff from a couple of days ago. We just haven't had a collective moment to respond, but we don't have any major issues with those. One comment that I would add, just in combination with the drive-through, is it wouldn't surprise me with the recent pandemic stuff. The city's drive-through ordinance is really restrictive. It's been that way for a long time. So we're kind of opening up some discussion on untightening that a little bit, just because, I mean, for instance, McDonald's on Sagamore, 70% of their business comes through a drive-through. So with the pandemic, we're not looking to handcuff anybody, you know, with drive-through opportunities. Both Chipotle and the new McAllister's they won't have a drive-through ordering option, but they're kind of shifting into pickup windows. So that may be kind of an alternative that we'll be looking at. So it wouldn't surprise me if we had an ordinance amendment for that. But that's just kind of a side note to some of the overall drive-through stuff in addition to this. So thanks.
Thank you, Chad. Any other comments, questions from anyone? So are we ready to move this on then?
Larry,
Yes.
I'd suggest we see if there's anybody who would like to send us any chat comments on Facebook or YouTube.
Okay. Any citizens' comments? Okay, you want to give me a minute for that, please?
Yes. I think we're good.
Okay, thanks, Sally.
I'm not registering any comments on either platform.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, so then next move is to vote on moving this on to the full APC, correct?
Correct. And that would be, we would file it in September and it would go to the August APC meeting.
October.
October, I'm sorry, October. Going backward.
All right. Zach, do we need a roll call on this?
Yeah, and we'll need a motion in a second first. We
Right.
never formally.
I move that.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Zach, would you call the roll on that one then?
All right, when I call your name, please signify your vote to pass this on to full APC with the recommendation of approval. Either approve or denies your vote here. So Gary Schroeder,
Approve.
Jackson Bogan,
Approve.
Vicky Pearl,
Approve.
Tom Murtaugh,
Approve.
Jerry Reynolds,
Approved.
Carl Griffin,
Approve.
Greg Jones,
Approve.
Larry Leverance.
Approve.
8 votes in favor.
Okay, so that will be filed and we will see that at the October APC meeting, full APC meeting, correct?
Correct. And the other thing that's going to happen from a process point of view, PRF will be filing a rezone for this land that is now, if not exclusively, primarily zoned office research. They will file a rezoning petition to request that that land be rezoned to Central Business West Lafayette, or CBW. And the idea then is that both of these cases, the text amendment and the map amendment, which is the rezone, will happen at the same APC meeting and hopefully then at the same city council meeting.
Great, thanks. Okay, any other comments or questions from the committee? All right, Ryan, would you give me a a minute and for comments from, for citizens' comments, sorry.
Sure, stand by.
Think we're good.
Yeah, no further comments.
Okay, thank you. Unless anyone has any other comments, I'll take a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thanks, Larry.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.